I'm Gemma. Nice to see you all. Thanks for coming. And I currently head up fundraising innovation at Marie Curie. So we are a small but ambitious team. So it's me and two other people. And we're basically there to try and find new ways to generate income, identify new audiences, and future proof long term income growth. So that's the day to day with a little bit of strategy and a little bit of agile mixed in. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. Nice overview. Thank you. So to get us started, could you kind of describe what was the situation you were in? What were you looking to improve? Kind of what are the challenges and issues you were most looking to work on?
Yeah. So last year I did a talk with you folks, which was great. And where we were at that point was that I had basically established an agile way of working with my fundraising innovation team. So we had previous issues with momentum. People were losing confidence in the way that we were working. And working with Tilt helped us to adopt some agile principles and to also reduce our cycle time from, I think it was 6 months to about 8 weeks. And that was brilliant because we were able to demonstrate impact really quickly, or much quicker than we'd had. People were more trusting of what we do, and more willing to work with us, which was great. And we were having a really good time, right? Like that was brilliant. And then I started working with Richard, our fundraising director, who said, "This is brilliant. How would we scale this, or how would we work in an agile way with other teams? Because it's working here. We know that Marie Curie is big. Um, dare I say it is clunky, and we need to be able to equip our teams with ways of working that will help them um, speed up, but also to work better together and to collaborate. So that's where we were at that point. So I think the work that I had done within the innovation team was really helpful and almost like a proof case, a test. And now we wanted to look at how we might scale that, and how that might look for other teams, right? Because it worked for us, but not potentially not necessarily for those as well. So it was a bit of an exploration as to what we might do next and how we might scale.
Brilliant. And I think that leads nicely onto the next question about how did you go about kind of tailoring the approach for that expansion out to those other teams? Obviously, very different to the kind of innovation work you were doing, which was
Yeah.
mostly kind of collaborating alongside teams. So, how did you go about thinking about that kind of tailoring up into scaling it?
Yeah, so our fundraising team is pretty big. So well over, I'm going to say all in, sort of well over 200 people. And there's always this chat at the beginning, right? It's like, well, do we make everyone do agile? Do we make small groups do agile? And then big emphasis on, do we make or do we encourage? Like, what's the approach here? And I think sort of previous experience has shown me that if you try and bring everyone all together, um, it can be really tricky, especially when teams are big, they have different priorities and also different ways of working, right? So what we decided to do was to identify sort of two teams. In this case, it was the mass fundraising team and the data insight and selections team, snappy name, to try agile, or to trial some agile ways of working. Now, those teams were chosen because they were a little bit smaller and they had some experience of agile, but it was patchy. Some had more than others. Others came as completely new, and there was some definite need for some prioritization, for some momentum, and for some better ways of working, or more collaborative ways of working. So we initially spoke to the heads of to say, this is what we want to do. You've seen it work nicely in innovation. Are you up for it? So they were able to see sort of roughly what the plan would be, and they were, which was great. And then we went on that similar process to engaging with the teams, and making them excited. And it's important to flag that when anyone going in a team and saying, "Hey, you should change the way you work," can be met with mixed feelings, and that was definitely the case. So there was a little bit of work of going. We're not saying that you're working badly. We're not saying that you're not efficient, because you are experts and you're brilliant. It's like, how do we give you the best tools to work together? And that's sort of I guess, the narrative and the approach that we wanted to take with these teams.
Brilliant. And yeah, I think there's a couple of things there that are really important of demonstrating how you started small. We always kind of say you should do agile in an agile way. Don't go in massive and do everything all at once. Start small and build up the picture based on the evidence that you're collecting. And so you had that small sort of
Yeah.
initial point with the innovation team, and then you were kind of building up the next iteration, and you were looking for that energy where people were engaged, they saw a need. So it wasn't just a need you'd identified, but they said, yes, that actually could help us. And I think that getting those people on board was a really big part of that as well, rather than going and telling them what they could do. It was more about, here's how this could help you. This is how it can make your lives easier.
Yeah, exactly that. We had to start small, and we had to. It was definitely the next iteration. So from one small team to two larger teams, but both of them, um, I guess, curious about agile ways of working and working differently. I think that was the most important thing, is that
Yeah.
that appetite and that curiosity. They've seen the innovation team work with in a similar way. They had been part of innovation cycles, so they roughly knew what we were trying to do and trying to achieve. So yeah, so it worked well in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we've said before, that curiosity is key. That's the thing to look for. It wasn't that everybody in those pilot teams was 100% bought in, sold. This is absolutely 100% going to work, but they were curious. They were willing to try and see how it went and kind of learn together and make their voices heard. I think that was really important. They were ready to say, this is working, this isn't working. What are we going to do next? And kind of have that curiosity.
Yeah, so if teams are curious and willing, I think you're almost 90% there. And
Yeah.
then it's just about how you establish agile and how you work together. But those are the two biggest things sort of we really looked for in teams, as to who would be next, is that curiosity, like, what are you doing? How could it apply to me? How can we work together? And we
Yeah.
took it from there. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. And with that kind of scaling work, looking to kind of bring in additional teams, what were the outcomes that you had for that kind of scaling phase?
So it was very much a test. So we went into it as, this is a new way of working. We don't know whether it's going to work. Let's try it out. And ultimately, we wanted people to have a go. So I'm going to, and also to make sure that that environment for them is ready. So team, try this. If it doesn't work, it's not going to be the end of the world. But we just need to try it out. Um, and I think it was really important, for both teams. So both teams are really different, right? There's a data team and a fundraising team. I think, but it was really important to have both teams have really clear, like, problems that they wanted to solve, and being really clear on that, um, so that they could get some tangible outcomes from it as well, and they could see sort of the progress that they had made. So I think those teams did a good job, really, in identifying those and tilt working to support those outcomes, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I also think this ties to some of the things you said before as well, but I think there was a big part of this was the influencing that was happening around the work, that um, it wasn't just the kind of workshops and coaching with Tilt, with myself and Ro. You were also very kind of visible and had a really clear idea of what were you trying to achieve, what are you trying to achieve, and how might this all kind of tie together. So it created a sense of
Yeah.
a kind of shared goal rather than just kind of an isolated piece of work that they were doing with us.
Yeah, so my goal really, so the reason why I'm interested in this and have skin in the game is that a lot of the innovation work that I do requires people to be able to collaborate and work together. And like with many big organizations, we tend to stay in our lanes. The fundraisers are the fundraisers, the legacy people are the legacy people, etc. And really what I wanted to be able to do is I could just see a clear need. Like these people aren't stupid. They really want to work together. But actually our processes, our ways of working, tools, etc., aren't necessarily set up. Sorry, it's getting dark. Aren't necessarily set up to do that. So my real shared or big I, opportunity thing was that I want to help people work better together because I know that when people do that, they can work better together on their sort of business as usual stuff, but also B, they're much better innovators, and they can do my job for me. So that would be
Yeah.
perfect.
Brilliant. Yeah, and I think key parts of that is creating that kind of shared language. So you don't need to be doing it in the same exact way, but being able to talk about things in a similar way, being able to use that innovation mindset, principles, language that allows you to use that in different ways in different kind of settings. So they can use that with you in the innovation team as much as they're using that in their individual teams or across collaborative teams.
Yeah. So for me, it was about. So I'm pretty much agnostic. Is that the right word to say? I don't really care what tools I'm using as long as it's adopting some of the principles. So that for me was really important for the team that they were really clear on the principles, but then were able to choose what tools that they would use to support that. And it was a real mixed bag, right? So like some teams loved the idea of going, okay, this is the principle, how would I apply it in my work, and could easily do that. And then the other side were teams that like, just give me the tools, I just need to know how to use this to do this. So it was a bit of a journey on helping people understand that there's no right or wrong way to do agile, in my opinion. That it's more of these are the ways that we would like you to work, or we think could work for you. Let's work together to see what tools you could pick out of that, and then let's just test them. And some of them will work, and some of them will not work, and that's okay.
Yeah, and they'll work differently for different people at different times, and that's okay too. Yeah,
100%. So I tended to start or with a Kanban, but that's mainly because the people are most used to looking at Kanbans from sort of the innovation team, etc.,
yeah.
or things like that. So you can sometimes it's nice to put sort of posts in the road and make sure people know what tools are available. But ultimately, we try and help them to identify their own.
I think that's actually a nice example of that idea of agile in an agile way. Often we're going into kind of be the first time that people are approaching this. So the kind of innovation team bit. But it's really nice seeing that in practice where because you had done that work, because you had identified the tools that had helped, because you had already got some kind of foundations, you were able to go to other teams and say, we don't know the way of doing it. There isn't only one way, but here's some stuff that helped us. And that was a really good opportunity. It's a great stepping stone as opposed to an external person coming in and saying, you should do everything differently. They see it as an extension of work that's already helped their colleagues. And that helps it to kind of land and stick a lot better.
Yeah, so sometimes it was a case of just giving them a bit of a kickstart. So they're like, "Oh, we really want to try this. Where do we start?" And I can support that. So I can say, "Look, I think let's start here." And then very quickly, people go, "Okay, that's cool. I understand what we're doing here." And then they tend to take flight, which is
Yeah,
really nice. Um, an example of that was, with our regular giving team, and they had the training and were really keen to adopt it in sort of their own world. And I was able to help them set up their Kanban. And then it was magic when they come back to me and go, we want to do more about sizing and like t-shirt
brilliant.
sizing. And it's like, yes, perfect, let's do that. So that was great. And then there are others where you they get, people go, we saw you do this thing, we'd like to do it too. And then there you go, okay, like why? And you question it a little bit, and then you help them you help them see the best use case for that tool that you were using. It either works or it doesn't, but then you can signpost them if it's not quite the right one for you or
Yeah,
their
and
team.
if you know why you want to use it, then it's easier to tell whether it's doing that or not. Whereas if you just use it for its own sake, it's really hard to know whether that has solved a problem.
So that's when that curiosity bit comes in, and I guess as an innovation person you have to ask why all the time, because very often people come in with a solution and you're like, oh, is that the right solution or to the right problem? It feels a bit mixed. So
Yeah.
asking why, I think, has been super important throughout this process, to be honest.
I think something that's coming through strongly is again that idea of agile in an agile way and kind of being able to tell stories and demonstrate impact that's happening in other places over time. And that is something that I think is really clear when you talk to people at Marie Curie. They'll often say, "Oh, I did that with the innovation team. Oh, Gemma showed me Kanban." There's a lot of kind of that comes up very organically. So I think you've really prioritized being very visible, being very present and available to people so that they feel able to kind of connect and be curious, and you really are rewarding that curiosity. Can you tell us a bit about kind of how you did that? Especially you work primarily remotely, so we know that can be tricky. So yeah, how have you approached that?
Yeah, so a lot of us are based all around the country. And recently, actually, I did a workshop in person, and it was a strange experience having everyone in the room. So it's safe to say that we're all very comfortable remote. I think so. There are a few things, I guess, with the innovation process and the cycles that we go on. We work really closely with teams. So I guess to the principle working out in the open is that we don't innovation. It's not a dark art. It's not some secret thing we do in a corner. We have to be able to show our impact, and we have to bring people along for the ride. So with innovation, we don't just do it and teams sit back and watch us. We get them to do the things. So at every point they are at a stand up, at every point they are interviewing supporters, at every point they are deciding on what test we're going to do next. So by the time they leave the cycle, hopefully they've come out with a really good idea, but also they've come out with a better understanding of innovation and then our principles, which are agile. So I think that has really helped. And then if they have a good experience, they tell their mates,
Yeah.
which is also really good. Um, and we are sort of we make sure that things are available to them. So we're just working on our SharePoint now, and they have access to sort of all of our agile innovation tools. So again, that's all there for everyone to use. We have a monthly Marie Curious newsletter that goes out, and we talk about all of the things that we do, and also have like an innovation tool of the month. So we're just normalizing the way that we work, and it's feels I'm hoping it feels more and more normal to people. Um,
Mm.
and it's just about making sure that we're accessible, I'm accessible. Anyone can ask us a question, and we'll do our best to answer it. And if we can't, we'll find a we'll find a way. And just allowing people and making people feel really comfortable that this, like, being curious about a way of working is a really good thing, and you should just try it, because it, as I say all the time, it's not the end of the world. The world's not going to end if your Kanban doesn't work or you try and have a stand up and it doesn't go to plan. It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all right.
And how have you approached kind of developing that attitude, that kind of you can't really break anything too badly, we can always figure it out together, and that kind of psychological safety? How have you gone about creating that?
For me, my team, so I only have a team of two people. But for me, I always make sure, oh, well, I'm just quite explicit. I just say, look, it's not going to be the end of the world if you get this wrong, but I need you to give it a go. And I guess there is this trust that if they do something and they get it wrong, I'm not going to be mad, and they can tell me, and then we can work out and fix a way, or I can coach them to help fix it. And I think that's worked well. And I think that works well for innovation, right? Because if you're not making mistakes and you're probably not pushing yourself to think of new things, new ways, new products. Um, so I think my team are fairly confident in that, and I think that has helped us push innovation further up uh, the ladder, as it were, or become, which is super handy. I'm pushing things and I'm trying new things, and I have to take my team along for the ride. And if they don't trust me, it's going to be really difficult, and vice versa, is that I trust them. I don't have to be in every decision. I don't have to be on every call. I don't have to be the expert, and often I'm not, right. I'm just not the expert in my team. If one of my team is better at something than the other, then let them crack on.
Yeah. And I think you had talked about as well, when you've got a shared set of principles and a shared understanding of what a good decision looks like, not necessarily a
Yeah.
correct or an incorrect decision, but good logic that is based in the principles that you share, you can trust people to make decisions and trust that you would probably have made the same decision without having to kind of be in that discussion.
So that's all I can ask for, right? Like they don't get off the hook. Like if they've made a really silly decision, we'll chat about it. But ultimately, they have a sort of a real clear set of principles. If there's insight there and the judgment's been made on those principles, then that's okay. Like, and it'll either be wrong or right or somewhere in the middle. But ultimately, if you're being guided by that way of working, then you can't go a million miles wrong, to be honest.
Brilliant. Thank you. Um, And like I said, we definitely see the kind of confidence and interest engagement with the innovation team across these other teams. Is there anything in particular that you think people enjoy especially about working with the innovation team that they then are able to take back into their own work?
I think, I mean, it's just my perspective, but I think we're fun. We're quite fun to work with, and we make sure that we're teaching and showing as we go. So I'm hoping that when people work with us, they learn something or they learn something new. And we really aim for people to work with us and be totally okay with being curious and asking questions. Um, so I think that's important as well. And I also want to make sure that innovation, agile isn't a dark, like as I said again and again, it's not a dark art. Like it's not this thing that only developers can do or only certain people can do. They can take those principles and make them their own anywhere. So I want to make sure that they've got that clear in their minds, and then have that curiosity and freedom to then go, oh, how would that work in my team? Um, and then also, if they're like, oh, I feel stuck, they can come back to me. It's the test and learn loop.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, testing and those like feedback loops and having those conversations, it doesn't have to be perfect first time.
What it does, I guess, is builds trust. So trust in our team, trust in other teams, and then collectively trust in the process, which is super important.
I would add as well kind of trust in themselves. I think for a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah,
teams, it feels a bit scary and it feels like a big kind of leap, and you're putting the kind of guardrails in place for it to feel less risky, less scary, so that they can build their confidence in doing it for themselves over time, especially if
yeah,
they've worked with you, they've had the practice. So now they're a little bit more confident, so they can go away and do it, just kind of checking in, and you keep building
yeah.
that confidence every time you practice, don't you?
Yeah, exactly that. And 9 times out of 10, you test and learn. And you get better and better every time. It's just making sure actually that when it doesn't go well, they don't give up or they don't go back to potentially an old way of working. They're
Yeah.
continuously, yeah, building.
And Where would you describe, how would you describe where you are now as an organization as a result of all this work that you've been doing, both with the innovation team, but also with the kind of pilots from the fundraising department?
Yeah, so we are in a good place. So from the pilots, so lessons have been learned. There are things. So a big lesson, I guess, for us is around tangibility. So making sure that teams have something really tangible to apply their agile principles to. That had been a chat that was direct feedback. So what we've done in our next phase is look at how we might apply agile principles to our planning process. So we're currently working with Tilt on how we might apply agile to planning, and also how we support a role we call strategy drivers to help us, or strategy drivers who are being coached by Tilt to develop a planning process. So learning both planning and agile as we go, which is really exciting. And then also alongside that, we're working on scaling innovation at Marie Curie, which is super exciting for me. We are looking at how we develop products that are more supporter focused, but also focus on long term sustainable fundraising and income channels that may not look like traditional fundraising innovation channels, as it were. So I think historically we've worked very much within sort of, this is jargon, Horizon 1 and Horizon 2. So optimizing fundraising products or building new fundraising products that are um, new to Marie Curie but not to the sector. Now we're looking at things that may be completely new to the sector but are grounded in supporter insight and testing and learning. So we're building that out, and we're also building alongside that our capability to incubate ideas as well for a little longer, because we appreciate that when they're completely new, they're really fragile and need a little bit of love and care, and also may not necessarily sit within traditional teams. So we're busy scaling that up over the summer. And again, all of that has been we've been using agile to help us go to the next stage in the process of how we scale on that.
Um, you've talked about the importance of working out in the open as well. So thinking about that innovation incubator and sort of not seeing innovation as this totally separate thing that's happening over here, how are you maintaining some of that transparency with the incubator as well, and kind of how are you joining that up with other teams?
Yeah, so to be honest, it's just much chat. So from sort of senior leaders right to the whole teams, we're making sure that we are um, first of all really clear on why we're making the change and what that means to them. We are have also, for the first time, have innovation KPIs with our exec team and our board. So we've done a lot of work in influencing them to say, oh, well, myself and my director have gone, innovation's important. You really need to have your eye on this. So pleased to say that that's worked. Um, we're also making sure that we're still part of day to day. So we are winding up projects, but we also have a Microsoft Loop page, for instance, where we send updates out every month on what we've been up to. We also have a pipeline which is accessible on that loop as well, so everyone can see what we're doing at any point. We also have regular stand-ups for my team, but we also have been trialing with mixed success, like show and tells. So again, anyone can come in on a stand up and learn a bit more about what we do. That's mixed success, because sometimes we fall out of stand up and are talking about what we're having for lunch, and then someone will come on and want to know more about our project. So that's always a nice surprise. And yeah, we have our newsletter as well. So you have full access to what we're doing at any point, and making sure that that is we're focusing on talking about that change um, as we scale up. So that remains consistent. And then we have big plans on how we support teams. Whilst we may focus on the bigger innovation, we're only a small team. So we need to think about how we support teams to innovate independently as well. So we're building our innovation SharePoint skill, like all of our tools, techniques are all available on SharePoint. We'll be doing some recordings on training. So there'll be a full training package as well for all teams to access as well. It's definitely a balance because we will be working more independently, but top of my mind is how do we still remain present, impactful, and people still benefiting from us as well.
Fantastic. Yeah. It's really important to keep that forward momentum in terms of embedding those innovative practices within teams, and that doesn't kind of fall away because you're not there directly supporting that to happen.
Yeah, so what's on my mind is how we measure it. So we're quite good at measuring what we do within a small team, but how do we measure other other teams' ability, confidence to test and innovate? That's a different story. So if once I sort of get the incubator and 2.5 kicked off, that's going to be a focus: is how do we support others? How do we measure innovation? And how do we make sure we share insight, learnings, etc., and keep that momentum and confidence and curiosity?
Yeah.
What we do,
Curiosity is key.
it is
Um,
key. Yeah.
You've clearly done a good job of influencing leadership as well with this kind of shift to having proper innovation KPIs that are being looked at that strategic level. And obviously that really connects to business planning, and taking a different approach to business planning needs a lot of buy-in from leadership and engagement from them as well. How have you approached kind of getting that buy-in? And you've mentioned Richard, your director, kind of what has your approach been there? How did you get people on board and excited to try?
So to be honest, it has been mainly using good old agile principles. So it was really important to sort of frame the problem or the problem we're trying to solve. It was really important to make sure that they could see that through a commercial lens. So if you don't do this, this is what will happen in terms of income, both now and long term. So framing it in a language that people will understand, and really looking at those stakeholders and going, okay, what will matter most to them and how do we talk about that? And then making sure that, I guess it's about having a I'm lucky that I have a good relationship with a leadership team and director, and they have a real appetite for innovation. But that hasn't always been the case, right? So
Yeah.
it's a big charity. We definitely have been low on the pecking order. We definitely have struggled in the past to sort of get our message out there. But I think the work that we've done has built trust, and I think, but that isn't trust in I've got exactly the right answer and I'm going to do it right now. It's the trust that you may not have this team may not have the right answer, but they know exactly how to get to it and to trust the process. So, and that's all kind of all I ask from any leadership team, is that they trust the process that we're going to go on, but that doesn't really happen without the trust. So it's been a process of developing that trust to get to the point where we are now, and to continue. It doesn't stop, it's continuous.
Yeah.
But we're in a good place, and I'm, yeah, super pleased and just
Good.
appreciative of the team around me, to be honest.
I
Couldn't do
think
it
it's a
without
really
them.
interesting point how much the trust, and especially like you said, the trust in the process, not trust that you as an individual will always have the answers, kind of like a superhero who can swoop in and kind of save the day, but that you are building a mindset, an approach, a process that can get you to the answers. It can identify the wrong things quickly, and it can help to figure out how to get to the right things. that creates the appetite from leadership, from teams. I think often the appetite, a lack of appetite, is more the fear of the risk of committing to something. But actually, what you're seeing is by laying those foundations of trust, and trust in the process, you're able to create appetite and an appetite for risk and ambiguity as well.
Yeah, and it's that when you build the trust, you build, yeah, you build that appetite, to be honest, and kind of excitement for the ambiguity,
Yeah,
which is really nice to see. So it's, very often I've sat in organizations where when someone goes, I don't know what to do, everyone panics. But I'm lucky that I have the support when someone goes, I don't know what to do in this situation. People go, okay, but you will find out. So that's okay.
yeah,
And you're able to work through the process, and sort of work through your thinking, which is quite unique because often people will just want to know the the problem and come back to me with a solution. But it's super helpful to be able to work with teams all across Marie Curie, to be honest, to go, I've got this problem. I'm not an expert. I need you to help me.
yeah,
And if they can, they do, and that again builds that appetite and trust because they know that I am going to ask for help. I'm not going to sit here and try and do everything. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you can do it well, and you should be
yeah.
doing it. So wherever you can build that, yeah, bring in the experts. That's what I say.
Yeah, I think you said at the beginning as well that you don't want people to feel like you're coming in and saying, you're doing it all wrong. Here's a better way of doing it. It's going in and acknowledging people's expertise and that you have one perspective and that actually what you're trying to create is a combination of your perspectives is a really good way of building trust. We're going in and not saying, you're actually wrong. We're saying, you're right, but we could maybe be even more right if we factor in this other stuff.
Yeah, I like that. Like you can be right, but we can definitely be righter. Like let's like try and work together to be the
Yeah,
most right. I
yeah,
think I think that works quite well. As I say, it's really hard to argue with the principle of like bringing experts together to solve a problem. Like everyone wants to feel like and is an expert in their field, so why not bring them together?
yeah.
Yeah,
Brilliant. Thank you. And I think we do see that in practice now. So we have started that kind of business planning process, and
yeah,
I've been really impressed with, and I think you've been really happy to see the kind of engagement that has come from leaders. I think it's tricky. They were given a very
yeah,
short window of time to kind of know what to expect, and they have come with that curiosity, with that broadly, I trust the process. It's different to what I'm used to, but I'm here to figure it out and kind of
yeah.
collaborate to get to the answers that we need. So I think you can see that actually with a test that's quite a complex, quite a difficult test, and you're seeing it kind of really paying off, I think.
Yeah, no, it is complex. Like planning is complex here because we're big, and it is a new way of working. And it's not like we all want to work, as I say, we all want to work together. It's just how do we do it, when and where? Like how do we strategically get the best out of each other? And I think that's what we're learning on the planning process is that we have to look at things collectively as a fundraising organization. Like we have to have those shared goals, that shared ownership. And then we also have to have a real clear understanding of how that feeds down into our individual team priorities. So we're all working from the same page. And they can also include some really exciting conversations, but some difficult conversations
Yeah,
because not everyone wants to hear that their product's being deprioritized. We have to really think about language as well because the minute you say deprioritization, people feel less valued, and that's definitely not what we want. Everyone is valued. It's how we deploy the experts on the best things that will help us bring the rest returns. And that's how
yeah,
we've been framing and building that trust on that front. Yeah.
brilliant. Thank you so much. That's all my kind of main questions, but I wanted to know, is there anything else that you think is important that you would like to kind of leave us on?
I think for me, it's you don't have to know everything to get started. And you don't have to be the expert in the room, even though you may be the agile leader or the person responsible. You're responsible for bringing these people together to find a solution to a problem, and that's okay. And you feel comfortable in that because they'll get a lot out of it as well, and you'll start building that trust, and that's the most important thing.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. That's fantastic. And I've been seeing lots of questions coming up in the chat, so I think there's
Exciting.
lots for Q&A, so we'll go to that now. But yes, huge thank you, Gemma. That was really, really great. Lots of good advice and good ideas. Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, thanks so much, Gemma. Thanks, Julia. Such an interesting conversation. Has been generating some questions in the chat. If you've got questions, if questions are coming to you, you can keep posting them in the chat. If you want to ask them yourself, you can pop your hand up, and we'll do that. And I'll gather together some of the questions that we've already got, and I'm going to group them together. So don't be worried if your question was earlier and I don't start with that. I've just pulled some of them together. Just going back to the beginning of starting to think about this iteration of scaling. So moving on, we had a question of like, how did you approach looking at what was in scope for adopting agile ways of working for the teams? For example, was it trialed with a specific project? How did it sit alongside business as usual work, which is often the question we get asked? So perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about that.
So this is where it was tailored because each team has different priorities, different ways of working, different understanding of agile. But we wanted to make it tangible and useful for them, for their business as usual immediately. So there was absolutely no time, no capacity. We're a big team, but we are ridiculously busy. Side project here, and it not be part of your business as usual. So the teams were empowered to pick their own projects and their own problems that they wanted to solve, and then they were coached in how that you would apply agile principles to that problem, and how you might think of that problem differently using agile. So we wanted to make sure it was as tangible as possible. We wanted to make sure that people could see how it could be applied to their everyday work. And I think actually feedback was that we could be more tangible, and that's okay. So that's why we went on to the planning bit. So again, it was still very much test and learn. We knew that it had to be tangible, it had to be based on business as usual, but we felt the next right step would be the planning bit, because that felt super tangible and yeah, able to flex the agile principles on that.
Yeah, and I would say from a like purely kind of practical point of view, that looked like a kickoff workshop with the teams who had already come to you in conversation, Gemma, and been like, yes, we're interested. Yes, we can see problems that we would like to solve as a team. So they had that energy, that buy-in and engagement, and they felt like they could identify things that would be helpful to work on. We did a kickoff workshop and asked them about those things to kind of identify what types of things are getting in your way, what types of things would you like to improve. And then we kind of set commitments based on the top priority things that they wanted to work on, applying agile principles to think about how might we start addressing that problem and try and start unblocking it. And then coaching used that kind of reflection cycle to continue checking in with how their actions had gone, and then setting new actions and commitments based on either the same problem and continuing to work on it, or moving to a different problem as needed or challenge. I think we had 2 data pilot teams and 2 mass pilot teams, and each of the 2 mass pilot teams was actually made up of 2 different sub teams. So they were quite complex sort of environment trial commitments, because sometimes they weren't quite needing exactly the same thing, but they were sub teams that we wanted to be working together as much as possible. So it was a good opportunity to focus on the collaboration across those kind of sub teams. And we just saw quite a different response. The kind of data side, they focused on things like prioritization, the kind of interface with other teams and how they received the kind of problems to solve and the requests for data, and becoming more of a partnership model rather than a kind of ticket model. Whereas maths, I think it was a more of a nuanced question, and they struggled more to kind of think of those tangible sort of what tool could we use, how could we use that tool, and they had sort of more nuanced problems. So it was really interesting. It was, I think, a great sort of piloting opportunity to really see the diversity of experience, that I think they started in quite a similar position, but actually getting into the work, they had quite different needs. So it allowed us to respond to those, but also now we can bring that into the future work as well, as we kind of expand to that departmental level with the business planning approach. So yeah, it was an interesting kind of learning opportunity. And so defining what was needed and how it was approached and what the scope was really led by what the teams needed, what they were missing, what challenges they wanted to solve. With data, it felt quite directed. With maths, it felt like more of a longer process to define what those challenges were and how they overlapped across those different teams. So that was really led by the teams and their needs.
Thanks. And perhaps related to that, two questions that have come in about kind of that support for the teams. One around like the mechanisms put in place to support other teams with adopting agile principles or tools. And Julia, you've touched on some of that. I wonder if we can like take be more specific as well, maybe also about Gemma, what you and your team did in relation to it, but also a question about accessibility, how to ensure it's accessible to all, both in terms of the tools, reducing potential barriers to the approach itself, like plain English explanations. So just that kind of support for the teams adopting this to make sure they could engage with it.
Yeah, so this, I mean, this was a test in itself, right? So, and we did a number of things. So we made sure that so one thing that we didn't do was that I wasn't part of those agile coaching sessions, and there was no need for me to be. It was important that those teams felt that they could trust Tilt, Julia, and had all of the knowledge that they needed to continue. But what I did make sure was that we was a point of contact if there was feedback. I think the teams got steadily more trustful of Tilt and were able to feedback pretty easily. But at the beginning, there was points where they're like, "Oh, I'm not sure about this," or "What do you think of this?" And we have a good relationship, so I can go back and say, "Oh, the team are thinking this. What do we do?" So making sure that feedback loop was present and teams could feedback to me and know that that feedback would be respected. I think in terms of, I think also to add, and what's been really exciting is the community of practice. So we had to wait to see the right time of when to introduce a community of practice. What that really means is a group of people that are really interested in agile and that want to do more agile things. So that community of practice is growing in number, which is really excited. So that, for instance, our men working group would like to apply more agile ways of working. So we're doing a session, like a proper agile session on how they might do that. And then word has spread. So people are joining the agile working group, which is really exciting. So we're hoping to build up. And I think, it's important to say that after this, it didn't mean that every team member had drunk our Kool-Aid. There was still, it's still mixed there, but there are pockets of people on teams that are growing to adopt agile, some faster than others, and that's okay. Another part of that is that accessibility. So wherever we can. We use plain, Horizon 1, Horizon 2. Who in the real world knows about that? So we're making sure that we're as jargon free as possible. We make sure that the tools are we can access the tools at any point, no matter where you are. So we have a SharePoint, we have a loop page, and we await feedback. So if people can't access it, people want tools in a different place, that's okay. We want to go where they are as opposed to bringing them to somewhere different. And the types of tools that we suggest, again, we tend to be quite fluffy when it comes to this is the tool that you need. But ultimately, if people come with a real a problem and there is a clear tool that will help with that, then we talk about it. So it's things that have been most helpful have definitely been the Kanban. Definitely have been the whole idea of a definition of done. That has been super helpful. The shared team charter has been lovely. At first, they were like ways of working and behaviours, other teams, team meetings, which has been great. A testing plan. So the fact that we don't have to test everything, but we can have all our tests in a testing plan and choose which one is the priority, that has been really useful. And also we've seen the adoption on our shared Microsoft Loop pages or shared spaces where teams are sharing information, insight tools as well. So again, this is the way to do agile. These are the 5 tools that you absolutely have, but we're seeing that those principles of sharing out in the open, testing, they're all coming to light, which is great. I can definitely give more details on tools if needed, and accessibility.
I think kind of what you said there as well is, again, like starting with the needs of the team. So you might go in, like we usually will use Mural and Zoom, but I mean in a very, very minor accessibility way. Marie Curie works with Teams, so everybody has Teams available and often open, so they had to close their Teams and open Zoom, and it was really annoying. So we always made sure we had Teams links instead, to make it a little bit easier, so we can be responsive to that type of need in the team. If they said we cannot use Mural, we would like to use something different, we can be responsive to that. And I think that is really helped by that idea of the feedback loops and people having that safety to feedback. And so I think that was something that you did really well there, Gemma, was being visible at the beginning. Kind of you sent emails out to the teams at the beginning to say, introduce the work, like you're going to be working with Till, this is why. Those types of things made you kind of the internal face of the work, which made them feel like they could come to you. It wasn't kind of happening in isolation, and that you had this relationship that they could kind of use to kind of share that feedback. And I think that's brilliant behavioral evidence that they felt that trust and that they did see you as a sort of visible, available resource that they could use, because they did pretty quickly come with some pretty clear, nice feedback that we were able to respond to. So that's brilliant. Like, it shows, I think, so in again the practical terms, like literally emailing out that kind of welcome email, being available to discuss with people, having the connection with the leaders so they knew that you were kind of heading it up as a sort of program. All of that was really helpful to kind of lay those foundations and make people aware of that as a resource. I think also from an access point of view, I have ADHD, so I feel really strongly about this, about like making things accessible, kind of being mindful of how people are going to interact with tools differently and how language and processing happens differently for different people. And we actually, with one of the teams, we did have what I would call accessibility questions, where they were just finding the tool wasn't working right for them. They were finding, and the kind of approach, they were finding it difficult to kind of process quickly enough. It felt kind of put on the spot, didn't feel like they could come up with all the answers, and it felt like it was creating kind of stress and not necessarily getting everything that we needed. And so they, again, thank you to them. They shared very clear, very specific feedback and were really open about that, which I think is brave. But they did do that, and we were able to like try and find ways to respond. And I'll be honest, the first few tries weren't particularly successful, didn't really get to the heart of the issue. And I think eventually we did manage to kind of resolve that. I think part of that was them practicing and getting more comfortable with the approach, and how different it felt to what they were used to. Because as when we're seeing it as moving at pace, we're kind of knowing it's imperfect. We're really trying to get some stuff and get started. Like you said, Gemma, it's not about getting it perfect first time, but they were kind of feeling like I'm being put on the spot to get the right answer. And so that was causing a bit of a disconnect. And so we were able to keep responding, but also practice and get more comfortable with the approach and what was needed. And that team really kind of saw a big shift in their experience of the approach, and that was really positive. So I think it does come down to, again, that rewarding of curiosity, rewarding of feedback, and being really open to, if things aren't working, be specific so that we can respond to that, rather than don't like it, it's just not working, let's have a discussion and figure out what isn't working, and so that we can actually respond meaningfully. And I think that's another way of building trust, is receiving feedback and saying, here's how I've responded to your feedback, because a lot of times people kind of think that's just going out into the ether and you're not going to really notice it. But being visible and showing that and being transparent about reacting to that feedback can be really helpful too.
And I actually think you've covered, somebody had asked what kinds of tools you were sharing, and Gemma, you've given some examples, thanks very much. And also, was there a need to do capability training, like building around them? And that what you've both talked about the kind of the showing it, the modeling it in the work, say that innovation teams are doing or one team is doing, and showing how it looks. And then also really supporting that adaptation and flexibility. So you talked about Kanban boards. Gemma said like the visualizing of all of the work in a specific way. What an innovation Kanban looks like, as opposed to a regular giving Kanban looks like, was not about like take this tool and do it the way we do. It was okay. So what do you need, and how might we build that for you? And I think so. I think while there was training and coaching and all the rest of it, a lot of that capability building has been around that kind of mindset, and also the reiterating of that and familiarity. And as Julia says, confidence building and practice and ownership and all of those kinds of things.
I would just
Yeah.
add as well. Oh, sorry, Gemma.
Okay. Okay.
So I think just kind of to build on what you're saying, Ro, is that a lot of the tools that I think really matter, that are really transformational, are tools for visualizing the work, tools for putting information into. So actually a lot of, I think a lot of the concern about tools is that there will be all these things to learn, there'll be all this kind of training needed and all this kind of new unintuitive stuff. But actually, if you're looking at kind of a Kanban board, it's just a to-do list, but for more people. So it's kind of quite intuitive in terms of what types of thing to put in there, and it's stuff you're already doing at least in your head, if not on paper or in a spreadsheet or something. It's just a different place of putting it. Same with a mural board, or a Miro or a planner board, sorry, a whiteboard in Microsoft. It's just where we're putting what we're saying. So if you transcribe a meeting, it will be in a document, but we're putting it into a kind of visual shared space. So we definitely would try and avoid tools where there's the accessibility issue comes from the complexity, where it's doing lots of features, but they're not necessarily features you particularly need, and they get in the way of the simplicity and accessibility of something like literally a whiteboard. We're just typing stuff in. It's the same as it's as if we're talking and the speech bubble's happening. So we're not learning a new kind of practice. We're just kind of capturing things in a shared space rather than capturing them in our own brains.
Great, thank you very much. I've got a few more questions, a couple of quite specific ones now. The first of those is, how do you stress test ideas through your agile innovation process?
Oh, good question. So with mixed ability, but it's getting better. So generally we work to, again, don't want to chat in jargon, but a double diamond. Ultimately, what that means is that we will receive a brief or write a brief based on a problem that we want to solve, and we'll go through a 8 to 12 week cycle to really flesh out what that problem is and to do some validation testing on it. So we'll spend some time understanding the market and the problem. We'll spend some time really getting to grips with our audience and whether it's a real problem for our supporters and not just us, for instance. And then we'll generate some ideas. This is really simplistic, but gives you an overview. And then using all of that insight that we have from sort of our understand and define phase, we'll generate some ideas, and we'll spend a little time building out the propositions. But ultimately, the less time we spend internally mulling things over and the more time we test them out in the wild, the better, because that gives us real insight and real feedback. So what we'll do generally is from each cycle, we'll probably have 2 to 4 ideas that we go, this feels like it's a good bet, but we need more information. We need to test it in real life. And what we'll do, depending on the idea, is we will go and test it within market. So that could look like a small digital campaign where we'll put, it doesn't need to be big money, a couple of £100 behind it. We'll put the concepts out to our supporters, and then they'll have the opportunity to sign up, click on something, basically show us that they're interested. And that helps us validate our idea and go, okay, people are interested in this idea. What do we need to learn next? Often it's are lots of people interested in the idea, etc. And so on. So what we'll do is it's called validation testing. And we'll go, okay, what are the 3 big things we really need to know before we can go to directors, board and go, this is a winner. I think we should invest more money. And we'll often do that digitally in campaigns, but that's not the only way to test. We can, depending on what the question we're asking, we can go out into the wild, ask, I've done things where I've gone out to Waitrose and showed people concepts or pictures on pages and have had great feedback based on that. It doesn't all need to be digital. I can't think, there are lots of different tests, ways of testing, but ultimately it's that validation testing that's most important, that helps us to go, hey, senior leadership team, we need more money now to invest in this, and we think this idea is commercially viable. Does that answer your question?
I think I would add to that as well. I think the biggest mistake I see people making is trying to kind of prove, like, we're not in court, we don't need to be beyond a reasonable doubt, we actually just need to be confident enough to invest a bit more. So I think you're right, Gemma, like we should be looking at pretty small budgets for that initial kind of appetite testing, so that we can say there is an appetite. We don't need to know that it's a kind of international millions of people appetite. We need to know that there is some appetite, and then we can go to the next kind of stage of investment to find out more and get more confident. I think sometimes people think if we test, we have to spend thousands, and what if it doesn't work? And actually, how much proof do you need for the next stage of development should be the question that you're always asking yourself, and you do that really well.
Yeah, it's definitely, so again, you're slowly building a product. You're not asking for, you've done a couple of tests and now you want loads and loads of money to build out something really complex. You're asking for, like, iteratively, what do you need to learn next to build this product, which will and that way of working will definitely save you time and money in the long run, because you haven't invested all of that money, all that time on things that a supporter might not want.
Thanks so much. I've got 2 final questions then. One is kind of focused on what's happening now, right now. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about the strategy drivers being coached by Tilt. The question is, who are they? What's their purpose? And how will they drive strategy through Agile?
Yeah, good question. So the strategy drivers, so basically it's an internal opportunity. So it's an opportunity on top of people's day jobs. So we have to be really mindful of their time. But we put a call out. So at first we didn't actually know what the appetite would be. Um, and a strategy driver is basically can be anyone within the fundraising team that wanted to learn about agile and had an interest in planning. They didn't need to have expertise in either, but they just needed a willingness to learn and an appetite to take a risk, and also feel, able to feel comfortable sort of leading rooms. So that's what we wanted them to be like. And the strategy drivers are responsible for driving the planning process, and taking the senior leadership team on a planning journey, with the idea being by the end of it, we'll have some shared goals and some shared priorities, and everyone will know what each other is doing and how they can help. And just to help feel more like a team. So I'm trying to think. So what we did is we made sure that in practice, sort of our team, our leadership team were happy with the approach. We socialized that first. They were happy, which is great. We fielded questions, so we made them feel psychologically safe because they were going to go through that process. And then we invited anyone across the fundraising team to apply. It was almost like a little application, or just to show interest, just to understand whether there would be any or not. And luckily there was more than I had anticipated, which was great. We only needed 2 drivers, but I think we were getting on for 15, 16 people apply in the end. To make it fair and equitable, we then did a very light touch interview, um, where we interviewed the drivers and sort of recruited our 2 drivers. I think what it's shown us is that there's a real appetite for this type of learning, which is really exciting. So this won't be the first and last opportunity for people to take on such a role. We need to figure out how we might do that going forward, but it was super exciting. And then very super quickly after that, sort of the drivers were responsible and supported in setting up our first planning workshop, making sure that sort of plans were articulated, prep work was shared, and they were facilitating the workshop on the day. So we've just gone through our first workshop, which went really well, and just about to do our second, and the drivers are leading that. So I guess I took a bit more of a lead as we set everything up, but now I'm happy to say that those drivers are driving, and just really looking forward to seeing how that goes, and how that new planning process pans out. Let's see.
And I think just to add to their role, it's kind of providing that like through thread for leaders to focus on kind of participating and engaging with the process of business planning, but kind of in a different way. So the drivers are there to hold that different approach and that vision of over the whole kind of program of work, so that leaders can really focus on responding to what the drivers are kind of putting in front of them. And they are, really fantastic, doing extremely well. So it's a really interesting. We were really impressed and happily surprised by the number of responders, because like you said, it's on top of another job. So I think that really also demonstrates the kind of buy-in, the level of engagement, and the level of curiosity that you're seeing across like very diverse teams within the department as well.
Yeah, that's great.
And actually, a last question is about buy-in. I think you've talked about getting buy-in from other teams and from leaders and so on. But I was really interested in Elle's question about getting buy-in for the experimental approach. You've talked quite a bit about that kind of the test and learn approach. We're going to try it and see what happens and therefore learn. But that is a big shift for people, and it does require people to trust that you mean it. Like not just in your innovation
Yeah,
team, but like that everybody means it, that their managers, their leaders mean it when we're saying we're doing it. And I just
yeah.
wonder if you have any kind of final thoughts for us about building that culture of kind of an experimentation mindset.
Yeah, so you need to, I guess you need to meet in the middle. So I can give you an example. So we developed a great fundraising product called Dedicated Daffodil. And then we went into pilot. And then, and during that pilot, the legacy and mem teams sort of took the reins, basically. And this was, I guess, the second iteration. And all of a sudden, because there was some success, everyone wanted to be part of Dedicated Daffodil. There were a million questions, a million things, and the team were feeling really overwhelmed. So what I did was plan a session with them where we basically stripped it all apart, and we just went, what are the two, three things you need to learn from the next part of this pilot? And we were able to identify. So it was, do we need a live, like, do we need a physical memorial? Do we need, I can't remember, maybe another couple of things. I just said, so your whole job really is to just test and see what happens there. Like, those are the three things you need to answer. Don't worry that, I'm super happy corporate are really interested in making this for you, but that's not what we're here to discover. So if you can focus on this, you're going to be okay. And then, but that had to be met with other teams going, okay, and that you want to do these two, three things, and maybe how we want to work with you may not be helpful in that way. And I think that's where that, where when that team spoke about these are the three things that we want to do, thanks but no thanks, and some of the opportunities or some of the other things, our leadership team, our director was like, that's the right call, great. And we were able to sort of press forward in the knowledge that people really understood that we were testing these three things, and we would get to the other things later, but we had to test these three things first. So that's really helped, and we'll continue to make sure that we're working in that way. But again, that comes down to trust. It comes down to having a real clear testing plan and a real clear like reason as to why we want to test. Because again, it's quite difficult to complain when we're really clear and in sort of and identify the real clear areas that we need to know before we can make this financially viable.
Yeah, I think it's going back to what you'd said about the innovation team, kind of generally your approach with the within the team is having really clear principles that you follow and an approach that you use, a vision that you follow, and kind of clear logic of how you've made the decision. People don't have to be happy with the outcome of that, but it's harder to argue against clear logic. They know that you're humans. They know that you can't test everything all at once. So
Yeah.
if you can demonstrate how you got to where you got to, that can really help. But I also think, like you said, you as a leader, but also Richard as your director, play a really important part in like laying that foundation by, as you've already said, being very visible, being transparent, so that logic is transparent, working out in the open. I think with Richard, kind of will always advocate for the position you've got to. If he is tracking the logic, he gets it. He's going to be like, they've done it. I trust the process. I trust the logic. So that's where we are. So we're going to go with that. And then if there's a problem, it's going to be surfaced by trying, and then we'll deal with that if and when it is a problem. So I think that's kind of the combination of you and Richard kind of advocating for that and really holding that position is really important.
Yeah, I would agree. Richard has been an amazing asset in helping push this forward. Shout out to Richard. He lets us try and fail.
Yeah. And I
Yeah,
think also he is very on board with what you'd said about kind of valuing other people's expertise. I know that he has a rule, always the last person in the room to speak. So he's kind of, I think he comes to a conversation as, you're the experts, you know the right answer. I'm ready to be told. And then if I have questions, I can ask them and see. But otherwise, I'm going to take your word for it because you have the like detailed knowledge. You're the ones kind of close to the problem, sort of not
Yeah.
kind of going in and assuming that he knows better, not going in and kind of overriding at the end, but going in and with, again, curiosity, genuine interest and genuine engagement with what people are going to say, and kind of an assumption that they know the answer up until they kind of tell him that that isn't the case, or he kind of has a question, and then he's again collaborative, like, let's work out how we solve this together.
Yeah, he's no pushover. So you're going to have to answer some questions, and you're going to have to make sure that your logic is rooted in insight. But ultimately, he's very much you're the expert. And sometimes in other organizations, it can be quite scary to have a director not talk and then talk last. But actually, it's not scary at all in this position, because he genuinely thinks that you're the expert and have the right answers, which is great. There's often sometimes I definitely come in sometimes and I go, Rich, I just need an answer, and he will do that for you. But it's not the primary way that he communicates or works with his team, which has definitely helped innovation to
It
scale.
creates like a culture where people know that they are trusted to figure things out, trusted to try things, that they're not going to get overridden at the last minute for no reason. And I think that helps to build that trust every day. And then
Yeah.
that kind of, it shows itself through the appetite for experimentation, but it's about those like foundational aspects that you're setting every time you interact with people.
Yeah. If anything, his main line is, how can I help you? So you have to, which is really exciting, but sometimes you're like, oh, I don't know. Actually, I don't actually know. Like, let's work it out. And that need arises, and he's there ready to help, which is great.
Yeah, I think just to kind of reiterate, like, it's that trust coming from that extremely senior person, the trust and faith in the people who are working in his department means that people can give themselves a little bit more trust and confidence, which gives their teams a bit more trust and confidence. So that's where that kind of appetite for risk and